what stories are you going to be able to tell that we haven't already heard? Turns out quite a
Yeah.
lot. Quite a lot. That's what shocked me. Because, I mean, look, we did on this show, we did the last Nitro, we did the last year of WCW, we did a couple of pay-per-views. We didn't do
Basically
week to
did
week
this
stuff.
documentary.
Yeah, but from
Everybody's
like,
copying us.
well, I think so. Where's our paycheck, Rock? Uh, but like, we did it from what you could see on television, right? So I was like, well, what else are we going to see that we haven't already seen?
Yeah.
Um, and I kind of want to start at the end and kind of work back. But the last episode had backstage footage from the last Nitro, which was crazy. Like
That
the,
was fantastic. Yeah.
the stuff around the ring, who was actually there, because it wasn't just Shane, it was uh, Briscoe, and
It was fascinating, the
insane to see.
mixed response from wrestlers. Some of them, like, so Dusty Rhodes, whenever they asked him, "Oh, is this the end of WCW?" and he's like, "So it's already over. It's not the
Yeah.
end. It's done." And then some of them who were like, "Oh, I don't know, man. Like, we're good." Like, some of them genuinely didn't know what was happening.
Well,
Some of them
yeah,
didn't
like
know till the day, till Shane McMahon showed up and had a meeting with them, that that the company they worked for was gone. Like,
yeah.
it was wild.
Well, okay. So I have an article here from the Sportster, right? And it's like 10 things we learned from the documentary. I think we'll run through that because it makes some sense. So the first thing was that like Turner execs never liked WCW.
No,
I guess,
only Turner.
well, I think that was always the case, right? Like even comparing that to the WWE side of things, you know, Turner rang Vince and I'm in the wrestling business now. So yeah, that makes sense. I mean, from day one when this story was told, what killed WCW was they lost television.
Yeah.
They were kicked off and it wasn't worth anything. And we're seeing that now with AEW. I really don't want to go into that, but we're seeing that with AEW now when the
No,
concern is,
no, we're
tel-
not.
no,
I,
but no,
I, I flipping you were going to do this.
no, I know. But you see, the narrative is, oh, if they lose television, blah blah blah, and that comes from this. It's a holdover
It's
from this.
WCW PTSD.
Yeah,
Everyone in wrestling has PTSD.
I think so. But it's funny. Like it's not funny, but it's like it is like a direct link. Like that whole narrative around this TV thing is because of this exact reason. And the main difference really is back then, none of the lads in there wanted wrestling on Turner Networks except for Turner. So once they had the merger, they kicked the only guy out who was screaming, "I want wrestling on this," you know. Um, so that was something
And
that I
the
would
weird thing is that, like, their opposition to wrestling wasn't even business minded. It was pure
personal.
snobbishness.
Yeah, it was,
It
and
was
like,
because Turner looked at wrestling. Yes, he personally liked wrestling, but
mm,
he also looked at it. He said, "Here is 6 hours of live program every week, 52 weeks a year, that I can always count on, that will always be there, and that will always have an established audience." Like, that's not just a fan, that's a business decision. And
yeah.
the other executives, particularly after the AOL Time Warner merger, like, their opposition to wrestling was pure snobbery.
Well, it's got to do with the advertising, right? Where like you couldn't advertise, like even now when you're looking at it, like it's a little bit different when you're in the UK and Ireland, or even in Europe in general. When you're watching it in Italy, for example, it's a completely different beast. But obviously going by America and the ads you'd watch, watching it on, well, even watching Raw, they're like ads for Wendy's, McDonald's, random medication ads. They're not, quote,
Do
high
you
value
remember?
ads,
Do you remember AEW got in bother because Nick Gage carved Chris Jericho's face up with a pizza cutter, and then an ad for Pizza Hut came on?
But there you go. I mean, it's still like fast food. So I get why they're like that. But also, I mean, at that time it was 5, 6 hours of content that was there every week, and again, the numbers were like 3 million watching Nitro, 3.0 watching Nitro. They're numbers that Raw isn't even getting now. They haven't got in 20 years. So
So whenever you were talking about AEW earlier, I was worried you were going to try and make a load of AEW comparisons.
I can if you want to, but I'm not going to.
You can, but they'll all be wrong. There is there is one single lesson that AEW has to learn from WCW. It is perfectly okay to be number two, to be tremendously successful, and to be in the black, and to be making money. You do not have to be number one. Burger King doesn't close up shop just because McDonald's sells more. WCW, even by the end, even when they were doing terrible, like you say, they were still doing great ratings and sales by today's standards. If that was properly managed, that was a company that could have easily survived. And
absolutely,
so what? It wouldn't have been number one.
Yeah.
The only lesson AEW has to learn from this is be your own company, do your own thing, and measure your success by the standards that you set yourself, not by the standards that the competition has set.
So on that point, WCW had to pay for Thunder, which was it's surprising, but it's not surprising. Like we could not watch Thunder. We tried to, and it is genuinely horrific. Like
a bar, one or two episodes where like the first couple episodes where like they were really trying to make it like the Bret Hart show and stuff. There was a few episodes of Thunder we watched that were fine, but it is not.
It did have the David Flair segment alone nearly justified Thunder existing completely. The greatest segment in wrestling history.
But it's not something you'd want to be watching week to week.
No, God, no. But here's the thing. Speaking of, some AEW comparisons, Bischoff wanted Bret Hart to be its face, very much like Collision and Uncle Phil.
Yeah.
But
that's true. Although different reasons.
But losing money like that was there was no real reason for Thunder because again, like obviously the execs weren't fans of it, and apparently not only did you have to pay for it, but we also learned that the advertisers weren't big supporters of WCW either, and that was surprising because like in some ways you can see it as like a financial failure, right? But the company never turned a profit for most of its existence.
Yeah, there was like 2 years where they did, but I mean, overall, when you're losing 60 odd million, the 2 years where you made 4 or 5 million don't really matter.
But the thing about it is, it's like a lot of that was because of these like crazy contracts, massive downside guarantees, and stuff just being mismanaged. And again, was a Bischoff. The one thing I will have to say, this documentary does paint Bischoff in a really good light. Now I do like
this is the Bischoff redemption.
I do like Eric Bischoff. His podcast is hilarious, particularly his little rants on it. You wouldn't like him, Martin. Don't listen to his rants; you get upset.
Oh, I don't listen to it.
No, don't.
One thing,
there's nothing there for you. There's nothing there for you.
I want to like a point in general. Like I'm not even talking about Bischoff or like Bully Ray or Cornette or any of them in particular. A point in general I want to make is that I think podcasting has really ruined a lot of wrestlers for a lot of people because
Twitter
you
too.
have these Twitter especially.
Yeah, Twitter
you got
too,
these people who in your you only see them as the wrestler and the incredible graft that they put in the ring and what they put their bodies through for your entertainment, and you love them for that, right? It is so disappointing finding out that they have like some mad political view or that they're this bitter, horrible grifter or, oh my God, Like, do you remember we used to talk about how much we loved? This only happened like 10 minutes before we came on air. Do you
Right?
remember we were watching the old Raw episodes, and we were like, Raw in the Attitude Era had such a great mid card. Everyone in the mid card was great,
No, who? I don't
great
know this.
crack.
Go on. What happened? What happened?
So I was. Do you know who you used to love? We used to always love Val Venus. Hello,
Oh, you didn't know
ladies.
about Val. Yeah, you didn't know about Val
I
Venus's.
did not know that Val Venus on
Yeah,
Twitter
yeah.
until 10 minutes before we came here.
Oh, yeah. It's
Val
disappointing.
Venus on
Yeah,
Twitter has been waging like a war of attrition against Nyla Rose.
yeah. For
For anyone who
years.
doesn't, Nyla Rose is a transgender wrestler in AEW, and he is horrible. I mean, I don't care what your views are, but just as a like a way to interact with another human, he's vile.
Mm.
Like, oh man, he's. I was so now every time I think back to how much we laughed at all those like hello ladies, oh, it's like totally ruined it.
See, that's why yeah, I call it the Chris Benoit effect, where
Yeah,
you just you have to stop thinking about what happened afterwards. You know the way when we're doing the shows and we're like, oh, I wonder what such and such is doing. Oh my God, they're dead.
they're
You know
dead.
that
Oh, dead at 40. Oh
yeah,
God.
we just gotta you gotta cut it off at a certain point and go, no, it's fine at that point, and then you're just like,
It,
because otherwise it's a
and
very
you know
sad and
what?
depressing experience.
That's really good advice for anything because huge. I'm a huge Slipknot fan,
Yes.
massive Slipknot fan. And then I saw the Slipknot documentary, and I was like I love you guys because in my head, your whole life is like going around doing insane metal, huffing dead birds out of jars, and just being mental. And now I've watched this documentary where Corey is sitting in the corner writing his poetry about the rainbow. I'm like, you ruined it.
You've ruined it.
Yeah.
you know, having everything accessible all at once sometimes isn't a bad thing. Or
Yeah,
sometimes
and
or sometimes
sometimes it
it's a terrible
is.
thing. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a two-way street, But anyway,
Do they say never meet your heroes?
yeah.
I,
N-
I, I don't agree with that entirely because I've met some of my heroes and they were like Mick Foley, Bret Hart, tremendous people to meet. I would say be very selective in
be
meeting your
selective who
hero.
your heroes are. Exactly. I think that's good advice.
Yeah.
But speaking of Eric Bischoff, he was known as ATM Eric. And look, again, I'm not going to do this because it's way too easy and unfair, but
He kind of had a point though. Turner said to him, "What do we need to do to beat uh, WWF?" And his response was, "We need prime time." But
yeah.
really, what his response was, "We need money," and that's. I mean, he wasn't wrong.
No,
Like
I mean,
the
look,
of
the thing
all
with this,
the issues and views I might have on Eric Bischoff that are deeply ungenerous, the fact is that he beat WWF for 80, like the classic line is 83 weeks. It's like a year and a half. He beat
mm,
them, and he genuinely did it.
yeah, and look, AW is spending 100 million on its talent. Wrestling is expensive. It always was. It always
And the
will be.
thing is, it
You
should
know,
be like we've seen.
that's
How
true.
many wrestlers have we seen whose you know hips are shot or whose like I'm not even talking about the likes of Owen and that who were killed in the ring, the likes of Droz who was paralyzed and yeah, wrestling should be expensive. You should pay these people.
But the thing
This
as well, it's not only on that point. I 100% agree with you. But it's not only on like what you would think. Buying the cars, buying the houses. It's like, yeah, you have to pay your own transport and hotels
yeah,
as
it's
you're
not
wrestling and your own medical and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, you're right. But like
yeah.
at the same
And
time,
medical in the US, which is
oh, it's crazy,
nuts.
crazy, crazy, crazy. Um, but like that's a thing where I wasn't sure. See, so far, like when I was watching these, I was like, okay, well, I kind of knew these, and it's interesting to a point that like we're in it. We're in the wrestling media. We do a podcast, blah blah blah. We've written for this that, and the other, so we're aware of what's going on. And what I'm trying to tease out, Martin, here is: do you think a normal wrestling fan who was maybe not aware of this, do you think this was a shock to them, or do you think this was like this is common knowledge?
I would imagine because, like, sure, we talked about it. How many documentaries have there been on WCW? I would imagine, even if there were like really nice details in this documentary that were new for a lot of people, I'd imagine most people knew the broad kind of strokes of this. But if you're new to wrestling, if you've never seen any of this before, this is a genuinely like fascinating topic. This is the downfall of a multi-million-dollar company, and the downfall was largely because of it was at the very start of the documentary. DDP, they go through a list of people saying who killed WCW, and some of them are going Russo, and some of them are going Bischoff, and some of them are going the TV execs and blah blah blah. And Diamond Dallas Page says WCW was killed with a death by 1,000 cuts. And yeah. I think that's the most prescient line of the whole thing.
But a man we haven't mentioned, bro, is Vince Russo. So he had the Wrestling Observer's worst gimmick in 1989. The worst on-air interview and worst on-air personality in 2000. And he suffered a legitimate concussion as WCW World Champion. He didn't draw any ratings.
He suffered a legitimate concussion as WCW World Champion. The most concerning part of that sentence is WCW World Champion.
But here's the thing that I find, as I said, I've read his books. I've watched him. His podcast sometimes can be good. I've watched him on different things, and he still refuses to accept responsibility. It is crazy. Like, I mean, I get why Dave's a big fan of him. Still, and
Dave's a big fan of Russo.
He is.
Dave, that's like finding out like your best friend's a Nazi.
Dave is sports entertained by Vince Russo. I'll say that much. Not a fan of him, but he is entertained. Look, a lot of the Actually There stuff is because of Vince Russo. Some of the good TNA stuff is because of Vince Russo. But
well, he says that. I think he was present for a lot of it. I don't think he was the actual mind behind it. I'd say it. A lot of it's been massaged as well, right? But I was shocked that he still hasn't the awareness to be like, yeah, you know what? Probably shouldn't have made myself world champion. Probably shouldn't have done probably me, with no wrestling experience.
It's that was surprising for me. The Big Bang idea where Eric Bischoff was going to buy WCW, it was going to take place on May 6th from Las Vegas. I didn't know that. I didn't know it was. I knew it was planned, but I thought it was going to be a little bit later than what it was.
I think this might be my not issue with the documentary. I think this might be why initially I thought, oh, this is just another WCW documentary full of stuff that we all know. I think it's because I read that book that it's based on.
Right.
But to be honest, when I bought that book, I had to find it on eBay, and I think it was like 40 or 50 quid to get it shipped over to Ireland. Right. So maybe most people haven't actually read it. So a lot of the information was new to most people.
Yeah.
So not that I'm, pretending I knew all about it or anything.
No, like I knew about it, and I knew this was planned, but I wasn't aware that it was in Vegas. And the reason why I said it is because the way it was set up, they were going to like block tape a bunch of things in Vegas. And what's wild about that is
TNA is doing now.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. That's what TNA did in the Impact Zone, and what they're doing now. So it's like, whoa, they've actually
they're to be fair to TNA, they're doing a far, far cooler version of it now.
Oh, absolutely. But like, this would have worked.
Uh,
This would have worked. But so here's the
Gareth, me and you said it when we were watching. Like we watched the final year of WCW, and so much of it was absolute torture. But the last three pay-per-views were a company really pulling itself together. Like we actually liked the last three pay-per-views. There
we
was
did. Yeah.
hope there. So 100%, this with the right management, this could have worked.
So here's the conspiracy. Here's the conspiracy.
Yes.
So we also learned that Brad Siegel was behind the sale, question mark, right? So who's Brad Siegel? So Brad Siegel worked for WWE at some point, and he found his way as the mediator between WCW and Kellner. Kellner wanted this gone. So the belief, and I would actually believe this. This makes the most sense to me. WCW, the company, wanted to be sold. Turner wanted it gone, but Turner knew if they sold WCW to the Bischoff, it would survive, and it would still have to be on Turner. It would be a lot harder to get rid of it. It would still be a thing. I think they knew, and apparently Brad Siegel's the one who knew Vince as well. He knew that Vince's ego wouldn't allow him to do that, so it would be dead, and he was right because it was dead within a year. Within 6 months. So I would believe that actually, and it's mad that was kind of brought out, but their biggest asset was the tape library. We knew that.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't have to have been. Basically, the way we looked at the product in those three pay-per-views, we're like, no, there is a strong product still here. The fan base is still here. The IP is there. What happened? Why did this sell for such a low amount? And
I think we
honestly,
need to remind people that the WCW, the major international wrestling company, sold for less than 5 million, and it was actually
4 million.
less than 5 million because there was part of that had some deal to do with like the death of the company, didn't it?
Yeah.
That part of, instead of actually paying for it, they would just pay off some of the debt. So in terms of what was actually paid for WCW, didn't it end up being like
3 something?
2
3,
million,
yeah,
3 million?
just under 3, yeah. Just under
Dara,
3. It was 4 in total, just under 3.
I'm with you here. Somebody had their snout in the trough there.
Yeah, no,
100%.
But that was the bit when I was like, okay, that makes the most sense, because it never made sense. Like, you were. I remember watching this. I remember like living this. Obviously the internet was very rudimentary at the time in Ireland specifically. But yeah, it's like, oh, okay, WCW is finished, and then all of a sudden Vince shows up on Nitro, and you're like, what? This doesn't make sense. And obviously, as a kid, you're like, okay, whatever. But then you're thinking back, obviously we've been doing this for a while. You're like, no, why did it sell for such a low amount? I mean, Bischoff wanted it. Like, look, for that amount, a higher upper mid card talent could have bought it. Jericho could have bought it in WWE if he really wanted it at that point.
Well, Tony Khan bought Ring of Honor for just under 4 million.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, and
that's Ring of Honor.
Yeah, that's Ring of Honor. But that's what I'm saying. Like, the fact that we got TNA so close from that, Jeff Jarrett could have bought it, right? Like, with the money he had. So I don't think it was a case of an open market. I don't think this was an open deal. I think what happened here is, and look, again, it could be a conspiracy theory. This is my theory on it, based on what I've seen.
I don't think it's a conspiracy theory.
I think there is a lot of evidence here that there was a backstage rat line, for want of a better word, where Turner were like, "Yeah, we'll sell it to Vince. Vince will kill it. It's gone."
And when we say Turner, we mean the
Turner
company, not
company,
not not
yeah.
Ted Turner
So
himself.
so Time Warner, after it was after Kellner got his promotion, when he was when Ted Turner the man was gone, they were like, right, just get rid of it. Who will kill it? Vince will kill it, and that's what I think that makes the most sense, because if
It
they
does, yeah.
knew, if because they knew, obviously knew the plan with Bischoff. There was a letter of intent. He had done a bunch of interviews where he's like, look, we're going to do this. We're
Yeah,
going to do the
buyers
Big
who were
Bang.
like literally the deal was basically done. They were
Done.
ready. They were
Yeah,
ready to sign the checks.
yeah, the deal was like that, and that's what makes it even more crazy. It's like, right, you're probably offered more money, but again, it would have been a colossal headache for Turner, the company, Time Warner, to be like, oh, we have to deal with this now. And again, all the executives wanted it gone. That's
Yep.
that's historical fact.
Part
They wanted wrestling off the network, and this was the
and
way to do
part
it.
of the reason I completely agree with your assertion that they were like, give it to McMahon and McMahon will kill it is like the generally accepted narrative is that McMahon uh, put on a Booker T Buff Bagwell match as a kind of a trial to
Yeah,
see if like they were any good, and it was terrible response and bad wrestling. McMahon was like, kill the whole Nitro thing. If McMahon was about killing ideas because the actual wrestling matches weren't good, WWF would have closed in the 90s. You know,
but even
like
to that, they had spent better part of 10 years denigrating and desecrating WCW, on
yeah,
WWE television. Why would a WWF fan at WWF at the time cheer for WCW? They wouldn't. It didn't make any sense. It just seems like it lines up too well. You know what I mean? It's like Vince gets to finally, drive the stake in there, and he gets to stand up and do the whole thing. And that's why the invasion angle, we've talked about that on this show and other ones like it, where it's like it was doomed to fail from the beginning. But an interesting point that was brought up, I believe it's in the book, but it was brought up on the show as well, that like the end was inevitable. I don't think that was the case. I don't think WCW had to end, but this was the quickest death of WCW. And who killed it? Like, I think, I'll be honest with you, I think with the executives being the way they were, there was no way they were going to be like, we're going to let this limp on. Like, again, I hate to bring up
yeah,
this example, so forgive me, Martin. AEW will exist for as long as Tony Khan wants it to exist, because there isn't that issue there. WWE, to an extent, had to be answered with somebody, and obviously that's why Vince was kicked out. But TNA was very much the similar thing here. TNA had Dixie Carter in power, and they put up with a lot of nonsense with Dixie Carter there. And then eventually that money was pulled, and they're like, look, we're leaving. So that can happen. Once the executives are like, we don't want this, it will not exist. And I think what happened was, with this, it just was going to collapse under that way. But I think what's more interesting about any of that is the fact that we now have an answer, a fundamental, clear answer as to why Bischoff wasn't able to get that deal done. For me, that's the takeaway of this entire documentary. Martin, I'll let you have the last word.
no, I kind of agree. The question who killed WCW is it's like DDP said at the start. It was the death of a thousand cuts.
Hmm.
Um, yes, the Turner executives were just snobbishly opposed to wrestling, and they even said it like in one of the interviews in the documentary. You have a Turner exec saying, "Oh, when you think of wrestling, you think of people going to a wrestling show in like a pickup truck," and I'm like, "Well, yeah, but like they had the money to buy a pickup truck, like, um, so yes, there is that, but even those executives wouldn't have gotten rid of it if it was still a hot show. If
Hmm.
Bishop and Russo hadn't creatively, damaged and destroyed what it was. So I think the question of who killed WCW is, yeah, it's a death of a thousand cuts. It's a multiple people scenario. It's a kind of a perfect storm different issues came together all at the same time to destroy a company. And like I said earlier, the the one lesson AEW has to learn from this is that it is perfectly fine to be number two. Judge yourself or judge the success of your company by your own measurements and your own merits, and not
Hmm.
by what the competition's doing.
I think that's a very good place to leave it there, Martin. Folks, if you want to check out the article that we kind of worked through here, it's on the Sportster. It's by Michael Weir. We'll drop it in the description below. Before we get out of here, Martin, is there anything you want to plug?
No, just like as a final kind of, because it's the death of WCW. It's kind of depressing, but on the whole, like when you look back at WCW, what do you think as a whole?
Missed opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, like there was some great stuff.
There
I mean,
was. I mean, when WCW was good, WCW was phenomenal.
I think we're far better for having had it. Like the Sting stuff, the NWO, Hogan, the
David Flair.
like the most boring like past it star